Hey, it's me, and welcome to Trump Mafia. Now, the question is, did Barack Hussein Obama commit treason with Russiagate? And the short answer is yes, of course.
Shadowy flight into the dangerous world of a man who does not exist. A young loner on a crusade to champion the cause of the innocent, the helpless, the powerless, in a world of criminals who operate above the law.
Now, let me explain, because these documents released by Gabbard, the DNI, prove two things. One, Russia did not hack the DNC. And two, Barack Hussein Obama knew that the intel report he received was reality, which indicated Russia did not hack the DNC and that there was no collusion with the Trump campaign. And he rejected this report and ordered his subordinates of the FBI and CIA to redo it, but add a false Trump dossier, which he knew to be false because he knew that it was the Hillary campaign paying Fusion GPS to then instruct Chris Steele to create such a manufactured piece of evidence. So he insisted and ordered CIA officials, especially John Bannon, and FBI officials, especially James Comey, to create a new intel assessment and adding a false document, which was a Trump dossier. Now, the result is you're undermining the results of an election. Of course, Barack Hussein Obama was very angry that Trump was elected by the American people. And so not only did he undermine the Trump campaign, and not only did he spy on the Trump campaign, he then also undermined the first term of a U.S. president because he didn't like the outcome of a presidential election. So we're talking about a sitting U.S. president launching a coup against a president-elect simply because he has a different ideology. Now, people have always accused Barack Hussein Obama, known to you as Choco Mbogo, of being like a foreigner. But even if he were born in Hawaii, and he was an American citizen, his behavior was certainly that of a foreigner, a communist Kenyan, not a Hawaii-born American who loves America. In fact, his two terms were about deconstructing so much of what our country is all about, creating chaos. And it was a failed two-term presidency. And it was full of a lot of communist actions taken by the Choco regime. But it didn't end when President Trump was elected. In fact, he left a ticking time bomb like the terrorist that he is. And it certainly had its effect because all of the media colluded. A lot of people were in on it, but he was really quarterbacking it, and James Comey. And so that led to the Mueller investigation. A lot of Trump people were thrown into jail, and you can argue that everything led to the first impeachment, also led to 2020 and what happened there, and January the 6th, where they even accused innocent patriots of being terrorists, domestic terrorists that were organizing an attack on America. Yeah. So all of these people were never punished because Bill Barr and John Durham swept it under the rug. So did the IG Horowitz. They all protected this coup. And what happened, just like people are protecting what happened in election 2020 and what happened with the pipe bomb guy, all of that is swept under the rug. You're not supposed to talk about it. But thanks to the DNI and President Trump, of course, we're now seeing the documents that could have been released at any time in these last 7 years, and they were not released. That tells you all you need to know about many of these people in government. But we now have some of the documents. More will be released. So let's talk about treason. Is it really treason? It's certainly a conspiracy to defraud the United States of America, 100%. It's definitely abuse of authority, 100%. But treason involves aiding a foreign country by attacking your own. That's treason. Now, who really benefits from sabotaging a U.S. president? Well, every country that's an adversary, even allies, would benefit, because a lot of countries paid into the Clinton Foundation, pay for play, believing that Hillary would definitely be president. So they already had everything set. So if suddenly President Trump comes into office, all their plans have to be put on the shelf, right? So they did not want that. So in fact, what Barack Hussein Obama did was on behalf of Russia, on behalf of China, on behalf of many European countries, on behalf of Iran. And so in essence, Barack Hussein Obama, known to you as Choco and Bogo, attacked his own country and undermined a U.S. election, undermined a sitting U.S. president to benefit a whole handful of countries that definitely are not our friends, and another handful of countries that are allies but would seek to benefit with Hillary or would benefit from a sabotaged President Trump. And they did, because President Trump couldn't do everything that he wanted to do because of all the obstacles and the time wasting, the Mueller probe, and it was hell. And it led, as I mentioned, to election 2020 and that whole disaster. Now, of course, you have presidential immunity, and Barack Hussein Obama, though, if part of a conspiracy, is still guilty of this conspiracy even after he leaves office, meaning the conspiracy that he's involved in was also when he was a private citizen again. So maybe he cannot be charged for that time he was in office, but he can be charged for any time after January 20th, when he left office in 2017. And so it really does seem like the DOJ can arrest and charge James Comey, John Brennan, and a whole host of other nefarious characters. With Obama, he could be charged even though he has immunity. You just cannot prosecute him for crimes committed during his tenure or his term, but certainly he can be charged for conspiracy after he was out of office. He could have come clean. He could have said, hey, I'm a private citizen now. We did something bad, right? So President Trump is duly elected and I offer my assistance. Instead, he moved into a mansion near D.C. and continued sabotaging President Trump to the point, like, President Trump went to Saudi Arabia, Choco and Bogo went to Saudi Arabia. President Trump goes to Italy, Choco and Bogo went to Italy. So he was kind of running a parallel government, like a shadow government. What was that all about? What a weirdo. But it's because he couldn't let go. He could not let go. So in many ways, he was still trying to exercise some power, even though he was out of office. And he was helped by the very coup that he helped create. In fact, he was one of the masterminds. And so President Trump survived the ordeal, but it's definitely because of this coup that the Mueller investigation was dragged out until midterms and even beyond, which helped a lot of Democrats to get into office, which then led to more of them attacking President Trump, which would not have happened if there was no Russia hoax, right? And the midterms would have benefited President Trump because unleashed, as you can see now, it's something to behold. When President Trump is on a roll, he's achieving so much. So in the first term, he did achieve so much, but he was still sabotaged, so many obstacles, even building the wall was obstructed for like 2 years. But in the end, it was still a very successful first term. Now, obviously, he will be even more successful because you don't have a Russia hoax. But you can see they're creating an Epstein hoax or trying to create other hoaxes. They're always trying to do some kind of a hoax, right? They always want to repeat what they've done before. Because if you don't prosecute these people, you don't punish them, they will keep on repeating it time after time. So now is really the time to lay down the law, to have these people be charged with a conspiracy to defraud the USA, an attack on America, really, and an attack on election results, and sabotaging the sitting U.S. president. Treason or not, it's a high crime, and it's something that James Comey, John Brennan should go to jail for. And let's see what happens with more of the documents coming out. But Russia is really exonerated because the first intel report, the one that Barack Hussein Obama, Choco Mbogo, rejected, specifically said there was no evidence at all of Russia hacking anyone. And in fact, way back when, the head of CrowdStrike, under oath, admitted as much. So it wasn't really a secret that the whole thing was fake. But CrowdStrike and the FBI were saying that, yeah, Russia hacked the DNC server because it was a foundation to then introduce a Trump dossier later on. But under oath, even the head of CrowdStrike at the time had to admit that there was no evidence at all of Russia hacking anyone. And that's the truth, right? But Barack Hussein Obama went out of his way to reject that report so that they could continue with the lie and the coup. So people have to go to jail, and Barack Hussein Obama is guilty of treason. And so there are several items of the Russia hoax that really interest me. You know, the participation of MI6, GCHQ in the UK, and foreign intel services putting spies on people connected to the Trump campaign. You can see it as these intel agencies trying to help out with Five Eyes to give some ammo. You know, you want dirt on Trump? Well, we heard this, we heard that. And some of it ended up in a Trump dossier because it's not a coincidence that Chris Steele was hired to write it up. He's ex-MI6, and when he was investigating Trump in 2012 and before that, when Trump was building stuff in Scotland, he was head of the department checking out Trump, right? So they already had rumors, they had innuendos and gossip, and that became part of the Trump dossier. So does that mean that MI6 and GCHQ is like at the inception of the hoax? Did they have an intention to create this hoax? Well, the jury's out. I would say now, with what you see, it was really all about like an alley-oop or giving ammo, and then our people pulled the trigger, and especially Barack Hussein Obama, John Brennan, James Comey. These are really the masterminds, I guess, and the ones that really did the most harm. The Hillary campaign, of course, were exonerated with the Hillary emails because the FBI, it turns out, did not even investigate it. You know, regardless of what James Comey said at the time, the documents now released by Grassley in the Senate prove that the FBI did not even investigate and just exonerated Hillary. Why? Because she was set to be president, and James Comey would enjoy the rest of his term. As you know, the FBI director can serve for 10 years, and a lot of other stuff. The Clinton Foundation, so many people were paying into that, and they had a vested interest to have Hillary, right, to continue with the Ukraine stuff and to open the borders. All of that would have happened in 2017 onwards if Hillary had been placed into office. It did not happen. But the hacking of any emails by every country on earth was because Hillary used a private email server, which she was not allowed to do, but she did it. Then she destroyed emails while under subpoena, And even Trey Gowdy looked the other way. Shameful. That's when everybody realized that Trey Gowdy was not only helping Hillary with Benghazi, he was also helping her with the email server, right? Looking the other way and talking a lot because he was hired by the Clintons. He became a prosecutor because of Bill Clinton, and that led to him becoming a rep, becoming very rich, and now because of all of that and Paul Ryan, he's at Fox News enjoying his life. Okay, great. But he's not the only one. You know, you only had a few good apples in the deep state, especially back then. But everybody thought Hillary was going to win, right? So everybody was like scared to oppose the Clintons in any way. And they all had an interest into having a Democrat there to continue all the shenanigans, right? And President Trump was a disruptor. But President Trump did win. And so what they then did was really sabotage and treason. And I also want to mention that Steve Bannon was hired by Trump not because he has any talents or he is a good tactician. No, he's a complete idiot. But he is slimy. So he was at Breitbart, he was a Ted Cruz guy, and he was undermining Trump. So Trump wanted positive Breitbart coverage for the rest of the campaign. So he hired Steve Bannon, who was the editor at Breitbart somehow, and it worked. Breitbart was very positive about Trump in the months at the end of the campaign, right? And he probably promised Bannon some job in the new administration if he won. But then President Trump won, and Steve Bannon just got like a super intern job. But that's because President Trump knew that there was something wrong with this guy. Now it turns out that he begged Trump not to fire James Comey, who happened to be one of the quarterbacks, right, of the Russia hoax. Now why would you sit there and beg President Trump not to fire James Comey, then afterwards, when it was done, lamenting and running to CBS, mainstream media, to say how much of a mistake it was to fire James Comey? I mean, is he serious? But it proved to me that he was like an inside man working for James Comey in a way, like you see an undercover, because he also accused Don Jr. of treason in the Trump Tower. So basically, President Trump fired Bannon as well. So he probably knew that Bannon was a bad apple, plus Bannon was leaking, you know, telling all kinds of lies to people like Cernovich, Joe Scarborough at MSNBC, the very moronic Jim Hoft, that Gateway pundit, and that added to all the chaos that you had back then in the first half of 2017, certainly. What a mess it was. So Steve Bannon actually added to the chaos, and James Comey being fired was one of the smartest things President Trump did in those months, right? Also, he was very smart not to start firing everyone, because that's what they wanted, because the Russia hoax was kind of like Watergate, like a reimagining of Watergate, and they got Nixon because Nixon went crazy. He fired like so many people, and that's when they said, we got him. You know, and they prepared the articles of impeachment, he resigned, and they won. And guess what? The Bushes were involved in that. Cheney was involved in that. Donald Rumsfeld was involved with that. The FBI, the Washington Post, you know, those two writers, they just wrote whatever lies the FBI told them, right? They were tools, willing tools. But you have the same with Russiagate. The media just printed anything that came from the FBI or Fusion GPS or Chris Steele. They just printed it all. They said it all on MSNBC, CNN, ABC, CBS, NBC. What a nightmare, right? So justice has to be served, because what these people did, it's 1,000 times worse than Watergate. It's the biggest scandal, and maybe election 2020 is even bigger I don't even know which one's bigger now. But think of it. All of that is something that President Trump triggered out of these people. It really shows that they had a system going, a real swamp, right? President Trump comes in and they all revealed their true selves. And what you saw is a bunch of monsters in our government. And, finally, I just want to say the fact that Obama, Susan Rice, Ben Rhodes, James Comey, Baker, and Bannon, when they held meetings in the Situation Room for months, discussing the Russia hoax or creating it or implementing it, you have to consider that the Situation Room is there. No phones allowed, super secret. What is said in there, nobody will ever know. It's not subject to FOIA requests. You have a Situation Room created for a crisis, like an impending war or some kind of an attack like 9/11, or, that's what the Situation Room is for. It's not for political operatives to sit together, including Barack Obama, to undermine a candidate in a campaign and then a president-elect. But that's what they use the Situation Room for. So we're talking about trying to conceal their nefarious actions, their treason, trying to conceal it by using the Situation Room. I mean, that's disgusting if you think about it. Think about it. It's disgusting, right?